Hello and welcome to Newscentre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The countdown to the February 1st Union Budget has well and truly begun. With less than 6 weeks left for the Finance Minister to table the budget papers on the floor of the Lok Sabha. The government has begun consultation with stakeholders. Prime Minister Modi met top economists today. Remember, the meeting also comes on the back of India's growth dipping to a 7-quarter low. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, top North Block officials were present at the meeting. We learned from sources discussions focused on India's economic blueprint, boosting job opportunities, ensuring bigger play for India in global value chains, among others. Joining us right now are Madhavi Arora, lead economist at MK Global Financial Services, and also Rajani Sinha, chief economist at Care Edge Ratings. Rajani Sinha, let me begin by asking you about the budget. Now, the budget is being presented in the backdrop of slowdown, 5.4% GDP growth in the second quarter. Now, this is a 7-quarter low. You've got retail inflation at 6.2%, CPI at 4.8%. Now, considering these immediate challenges in mind, what kind of a budget does India need to have a sustained growth path? Because this is something that everyone has been talking about, and the Indian government, the Prime Minister, is also working on a Viksit Bharat blueprint. Rajani Sinha, can you hear me?
Yes. So, talking about the budget, I would say that one near-term fix that I can think of is that the government needs to focus on consumption boost. Because if we see in the last few years, the government's focus was on capex, and that has helped India record high growth. But if you're looking at now sustaining growth, I think some form of consumption stimulus is also required. So in that sense, I feel in the upcoming union budget, if the FM looks at, some kind of cut in personal income tax by, say, around 5%, the total income tax liability across all tax slabs, that should help boost consumption sentiments, consumer sentiments and consumption spending. But over a longer period of time, if I talk about our aspiration of being a developed country, for that, I think there are some other aspects that we need to focus on. And one, I think, very critical aspect in that is increasing the rural income. Given that more than 60% of India's population lives in rural area, if, the government policies or measures are able to increase the rural income, that can really be the game changer. And this is where I feel the focus should be on improving agriculture productivity. There's a lot that's happening on technology front. There should be, incentives given for adoption of technology in agriculture sector also. So in that sense, the fund, something like Agri Accelerator Fund that we have, there should be further support given to that. There should be support given to schemes that encourage farmer-producer organization. So I think these kind of measures are required to further give a boost to rural income. Apart from that, I would like to add even, announcing measures to boost agri-allied sectors like agri-processing, livestock, horticulture. These things will not only help absorb some of the workers from agriculture to these agri-allied sectors, but will also help improve labor productivity and rural income.
Right.
Hello.
Let me also get in Madhavi. Yeah. Please, Ms. Sinha, please stay with us. Thank you for giving us those opening remarks. We'll return to you in a few seconds from now. Let me get in Madhavi Arora as well. Madhavi Arora, what are the immediate challenges you see from the Q2 GDP numbers? Do you feel this is a temporary blip on the phenomenon, or there are some key and serious issues in the economy which need addressing, even though we are talking about a long-term blueprint, a long-term high-growth trajectory for the economy?
Hi, Parikshit. Well, I think for the Indian economy at this point in time, and something which is probably been the case last 1 year specifically, has been, absence of the private economic agents, and that's not coming back any sooner. Probably the next 6 to 9 months or even longer, you'll probably see a very lagged response by private economic agents, be it consumption or investment. And, the policymakers have been very categorical in terms of their spend. They've been very focused on a capital expenditure spend versus revenue expenditure, at least at the center's end, if not at the state's end. But at this point in time, if you look back and see the response the private sector has been very, very tepid as far as the private capex is concerned, which sort of makes us believe that the private capex will only probably take off only when you're seeing private consumption really take off. And sitting today, what we're seeing is that even though rural is seeing some cyclical uptick in consumption, it's still pretty early signs, and rural income still hasn't really reached the pre-demon level, forget the pre-COVID level. It has actually been decimated since demonetization. But the urban segment, which had seen an uptick in income in the upper middle strata post 2021, has been secularly coming off on account of moderation in sectors like IT and BFSI wages in general, which has really hit that the middle income and the upper middle class income bracket. To that extent, I think urban income and urban consumption also is looking to be a concern, and which generally it has sort of come off with a lag, but I don't think that it'll immediately sort of see a V-shaped recovery either, which means that the private consumption could remain a little bit of a laggard in terms of an uptake. It'll be probably tepid, it'll be very sluggish, which also will rub off private consumption, even though there has been a consistent policy effort on account of the center to increase their own capital expenditure to crowd in private capital expenditure, which has not really happened. At the same time, you're also seeing states who have been little, hesitant with regard to their own capital expenditure. So overall, policymakers' combined capital expenditure hasn't really seen a big uptick, to be very honest. But center clearly has been focused on urban infra in sectors like defense, road, railways, etc., and wherein the policy focus has clearly been more towards improving the productivity multiplier via these sectors, but it has not really taken place as far as the private sector involvement is concerned.
Right. Now, to specifically ask you about what could probably trigger more private capex. Now, almost every few months, there are meetings held within different ministries in the government on what can be done to increase the flow of private capex. It is something that the government is cognizant of. Now, having said that, what do you believe, Madhavi Arora, can be done in the union budget to unleash that ability to spend? One, if the industry does not see enough consumption potential, they will not put up additional capacity.
Correct.
If they don't see export opportunities, they will not invest. So what, according to you, could be the game changer initiative in the budget?
I think it's a very tricky call because policymakers have been doing what they can. I think policy uncertainty is one thing that really bothers private sector guys in terms of putting in their expanding their businesses or expanding their capital expenditure. What essentially is happening on the global front with regard to what could really take place in terms of tariffs, in terms of the external demand. I think that also will weigh on their thought process. So I think to some extent, central policymakers would have very limited role to play in the immediate run. All they can do is probably, give some impetus to urban consumption. But again, you don't want a policy budget which is very biased towards consumption, because that's not has been the policy prerogative of this government, at least on papers. I think they would still like to focus on the capital expenditure from their end. To that extent, I think the only way they can really improve the consumption side is to probably incentivize businesses or employment in some sense to increase the income capacity of the urban sector and the rural sector as well, rather than giving any free doles to urban or rural segment by increasing REVEX via non-merit subsidies. I think that is something that I would not recommend this government to do, which is what we're seeing at the state level. So I don't think that the government would, at the center at least, would be going, will be taking that route either. But it'll be a very difficult policy choice for them, because while we may see relatively softer interest rate in the, at the margin, I think higher inflation, low certainty with regard to the growth trajectory in general, and global dynamics, which are looking very patchy in terms of their own decision making, would also play a very important part, apart from what just an event effect of budget per se.
Right. Rajani Sinha, when we speak about a Viksit Bharat, and we hear that this was the big priority at this meeting as well, but when we speak about having a developed country by 2047, economists are unanimous on the view that you need a 8 to 9% growth, year after year, consistently, to achieve the status of a developed country by 2047. Now, keeping that challenge in mind, how do we ensure that the relevant sectors of the economy fire all cylinders?
So, absolutely correct. If we want to sustain high growth over a longer period of time, we have to see to it that, some of our sectors continue to do very well. So here, I think what can really help is if the government identifies few sectors that have high export potential and are labor intensive, say pharmaceutical sector, electronics, auto ancillary, textile, leather. So identify some of these champion sectors and create whole ecosystem to attract investment in these sectors. And this could be in the form of growing the already existing clusters, industrial clusters, or, coming up with new clusters which has the entire, high quality infrastructure, backward and forward linkages to ensure that we are able to attract investment in these sectors. And at the same time, the government has to see that the supply chain movement is eased in the sense that if there is need to reduce import tariff to make some of these exports more competitive, then those items should be identified. Or when I say the whole ecosystem should be created, including having skilling institutes, incentivize corporates to build up skilling institutes in these industrial corridors, so that the skilling is customized as per the requirement of these, specialized industrial corridors, and the workers there can be directly absorbed. So I think this is one model. It was, in the last budget, FM spoke about, building some new industrial clusters. So I think the focus on this should grow. This is a model which many of the East Asian countries have adopted, and it has worked there. So I think the government should focus on this model going forward.
Right. Now, when it comes to job creation, there were 3 schemes which were announced in the budget in July. What further impetus do you need? Because looking at the political situation in the country, the situation of farmers, the situation of jobs, the lack of skilled jobs, that is always a major political point in election after election. Now, how do we ensure that both the public and the private sector can create more jobs? The CA in the past, in reports, has urged the private sector to come out and take responsibility of employing more people in the country. But how do we do that?
So, and actually to add to what you said with automation and digitalization that has come into the picture, that makes it that much more difficult for the private sector to absorb more people. Here, I think we have to go to the root, and again, I would say look at agri sector, because that is the main employment. Large part of the workforce is employed there. So what can we do to improve the productivity there? Second, what can we do to move the workers from agri sector to other sectors? Specifically, the easy movement would be to agri-allied sector. So giving a push to these sectors will help. Secondly, support to MSME segment, because the other big chunk of employment generation happens in this segment. So if the government is supporting MSME segment, which there is a lot happening on that front, but that will also help in employment generation in this segment. And then the other critical piece in this is skilling institutes, because what is happening is that even if there are jobs created, if there is demand for jobs, we do not have people adequately skilled to be absorbed. So in that sense, the entire focus has to be on skilling and vocational education, because right now what's happening in our country is we have a lot of workforce, young people coming out from colleges with the graduate degree, which is actually of no use, because we still in our country have this kind of stigma around vocational education and skilling, which needs to go. We need to have skilling at a very, really up that game to ensure that people are adequately skilled to be absorbed in even, when there is demand for jobs, there are people adequately skilled for those jobs. So I think these are a few of the areas that we need to focus on.
Right. Need to really up our game on skilling to ensure adequately skilled people are ready for a future-ready workforce. Rajani, Sinha, Madhavi, Arora, thank you very much for joining us on the program to discuss the key meeting that took place in Niti Aayog today, your recommendations for the budget and also for a Viksit Bharat or developed nation by 2047. We're taking a short break here on CNBC TV18, but don't go anywhere. More than 4 months after former Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina fled to India, the country's new interim government is calling for her extradition. On the other side, we take a deep dive into the diplomatic process with Deepak Vora, former Indian ambassador to Poland, and also several other countries in Africa and